Call it India's ignored conflict. It's been 2 years since violence in Manipur erupted. Yet, 60,000 remain displaced by intercommunal tensions between the majority Meitei and the Kuki-Zo communities. We'll ask why mediation efforts have stalled and what's changed since the central government imposed president's rule from Delhi at the start of this year. We'll ask why the prime ministers remain mostly silent on Manipur, why foreign journalists have to apply for special accreditation, which is rarely granted if they want to go there, and ask our panel to react to our exclusive report filmed by France 24's local team. More broadly, what lessons can the rest of India draw, particularly in regards to unrest and insurgencies in other border areas like Kashmir and the mountains near China? As the economy grows in the world's most populous nation, how do age-old rivalries evolve? Today in the France 24 debate, where's Manipur's path to reconciliation? With us, Binalakshmi Napram, founder and director of the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you.
From Chennai, journalist and lawyer Grishma Kutha, welcome to the show. David Cameron is senior researcher and adjunct professor at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
And a pleasure, as always, to see France 24's Leela Jacinto. How are you?
Not bad.
Okay. You can always listen to the show, by the way. That's right, listen to it, wherever podcasts are streamed. 2 years, an unofficial divide now, with the Meitei-dominated Imphal Valley on one side, the Kuki-dominated hill districts on the other. And as our team found, those who used to live side by side uprooted. France 24's Kansa Junaid and Danish Pandit went to Manipur.
In Churachandpur, a city in the northeast Indian state of Manipur, families are still grieving the loss of their loved ones. Bebem lost her husband as a result of the violence that erupted between the Hindu majority Meiteis and the Christian Kukis on the 3rd of May 2023. Today, she brings her 3-year-old daughter to visit her father's grave at this cemetery dedicated to the Kuki victims.
Visiting this place brings back memories of the torture my husband endured. At times, I'm overwhelmed with anger, and I must gather my strength. He was the first one to be killed from Jiri bomb. He was dragged away to the road. He was then thrown into the river. I'm still angry, but I also pray for a strong heart.
The clashes began when the Kukis were protesting a court order recommending a special status for the Meitei majority, a move granting them land rights and government jobs. The Kukis, who already have the status, feared losing the special protection as a minority. The unrest escalated into one of India's deadliest ethnic clashes, with over 200 killed within 2 years. The conflict has displaced 60,000 people. Bebem is one of them. After fleeing her village over 200 kilometers away, she now lives in this relief camp with her daughter.
I don't feel safe there anymore because violence could erupt at any time. Running away was very difficult for me.
In the hills of Manipur, which are largely home to the Kukis, young men have picked up weapons. This 28-year-old left his customer service job in Mumbai to return home only to join an armed group.
Despite a heavy military presence and calls by the government to return, armed men from both sides continue to patrol their regions.
When the war erupted, many of our women were raped, killed, and stripped naked. Even infants were killed, and all Kukis were hunted down. 2 years have passed, and Prime Minister Modi has never visited. Are our lives less valuable? Our aim and demand is separate administration from the Meiteis.
The state is now split along ethnic lines, with several checkpoints in between. Just 60 kilometers away, fresh clashes broke out between Meitei and Kuki farmers over the control of farmland. As the growing season begins, Nandaiba Mobi is afraid to return to his fields. Instead, he sticks to whatever land lies within the safe zone.
The conflict has disrupted our access to the market. Our farming has been halted, affecting our livelihood significantly.
The village head Roshan shows us where the community once lived side by side. Now, there's an unofficial border that no one dares to cross.
The stream served as a border between Meiteis and Kukis. Historically, there is no such demarcation. We used to coexist peacefully. They used to come to us and we'd buy goods from them. We exchanged everything and lived in harmony.
As village chief, he questions the heavy army presence and the locals' need for permission to visit their own land.
As civilians, we are not as familiar with guns and the military as we are now. Most of the children feel scared, while others have grown used to it. Now guns have become a common sight in the village.
In this conflict, women have been the leaders, but also the victims of the horrific mob violence and sexual assault. Salam Ogbi leads the Mera Paibi, or torch-bearer women, a group formed to fight drugs, not defend the Meitei community.
I believe
that the world and the authorities have completely forgotten about Manipur. We now spend nights on the roadside, staying awake to guard our homes.
Prime Minister Modi's Hindu Nationalist Party, which held power in Manipur, has been criticized for failing to contain the violence and supporting the Meitei majority. With no end to the conflict, the people of Manipur await peace and justice.
Binakshami, Napram, we saw in that report that village chief showing our team that stream that now acts as a dividing line. Your thoughts on whether or not there can be peaceful coexistence?
Thank you so much. First of all, what happened 2 years ago, what started 2 years ago in Manipur, is one of the darkest moments in modern India's history. That two communities who have been living side to side in my beautiful homestead of Manipur have been fractured apart. For us, Manipur is home to 34 indigenous communities, 34 communities. It's not just a home of just the Meiteis or the Kukis, but there are many other small ethnic minorities living in one of the oldest former Asiatic nation states, which is located in India's northeast. So for us, in modern day democratic India, world's largest democracy, how can you imagine a buffer zone between, say, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, or Delhi and Haryana? This is an engineered conflict done by those who are close to guns, drugs, and political power. For us, it is very clear. Manipur, one of the most beautiful states in northeast of India, the land which gave polo to the world, the land which gave Olympians, and also a land which is one of the 36 major biodiversity hotspots. A violent conflict is engineered on its territories. For us, this is not an ethnic conflict between Meiteis and Kukis only. This is a conflict engineered because Manipur and northeast of India sits on a whole landmass of very huge resources. Critical minerals, which are needed for technology, for defense, for semiconductors, are found under our soil. So it is we were also just like the British divide and rule policy, currently at my beautiful homestead of Manipur, a conflict has been engineered to ensure that the people are dead. Buffer zones are created so that we don't, go to each other. This is abnormal, and we call upon the government of India and the policy makers to stop this divide and rule policy, to enable people to farm, enable people to coexist, because Manipur has more than 2,000 years of history, a history which has seen peaceful existence amongst religion, amongst community. But neither the Indian press Neither Indian policymakers have been able to diagnose this clearly because they come only in flying visits. But we, the people of Manipur, we know how our hearts are pained at the thoughts of our children being killed, our women being sexually assaulted, and our young children going to war. This is abnormal in the world's largest democracy and must stop. And that is why we, the women of Manipur, across ethnic lines and across the northeast of India, we are starting a process which is known as indigenous peace building, which will look into our old ways of living and working to enable us to feed our children, to be able to bring families together. This is possible. Coexistence is the way forward in this fractured northeast of India. This is not the first conflict in the region. Conflict in this region has been over 70 years old. Manipur have lost thousands of people, not just in the last 2 years. We have 1,500 cases of extrajudicial killing, rape in conflict, and a martial law called Armed Forces Special Council, clamped on the people of Manipur for over decades. So we must ensure to be able to bring peace in this region. We have to ensure that we are working with policymakers, with the government, with civil society, to ensure that we're able to get confidence-building measure, to be able to get dialogue amongst community.
All right, let me bring in on this point, Grishma.
That is the only way forward.
Let me bring in on this point, Grishma Kutha, because let's go over for our viewers, please, the timeline, Grishma Kutha. The outbreak of violence 2 years ago, there was a beginnings of a reconciliation effort, but it kind of didn't go very far. And now direct rule from Delhi, more of a police presence, more of an army presence. Is the problem that the central government has taken one side, or is the problem of indifference? Manipur on the map is far from where the capital is. It only sends 2 lawmakers to the lower house of parliament. Is Manipur forgotten, or is it part of some kind of strategy from above?
Well, honestly, see, if there was a difference of opinion within political parties that are ruling Manipur, and there was another political party ruling, from the center, from Delhi, then maybe it would have made sense to say that, there is no meeting of minds between the central government and the state government. But like you know already, the party that is ruling from the center in Delhi and in Manipur is the BJP. So is it, like the question that you posed, is it that there is no intention? Is the BJP not empathetic enough to see what's happening in Manipur? Because it's pretty evident, okay? I mean, if you were to, as a journalist, for me to have reported from there in the last 2.5 years, more than 2 years, I would say nothing has really changed. Just because violence isn't happening doesn't mean that the material reality of people have changed. There are parts of Manipur, like some parts in the hill districts, where previously it would have taken 3 to 4 hours for women to travel for something as basic as an ultrasound. Now it takes 6.5 to 7 hours. There are infrastructural problems that are there in Manipur, which are worse off in the districts where the tribals, that the Kuki-Zos and the Nagas live. So those problems have become even worse.
And Grishma, on this point, that the trigger of it all was this granting to the Hindu majority Meiteis of this minority status. When the violence erupted, that status was revoked, but the genie was out of the bottle. Tell us what happened.
No, the Meiteis were never a scheduled tribe. So in the context of India, what needs to be understood is that there are different communities that are granted particular constitutional provisions because of various reasons. So in India, there is the scheduled tribes, the scheduled castes, the backward castes, etc. The Meiteis, some Meiteis have OBC status, which is other backward castes, but they do not have the scheduled tribe status, like the Kukis and another tribe called the Nagas have. So this means that these tribes, their land is something that they own, and non-tribals cannot own this land. So at the base of this conflict, which is what people say, is that the Meiteis were seeking ST status recently, but there have been 2 attempts in the last 50 years where the central government, different departments of the central government have themselves looked at this request and have stated on 2 occasions that the Meiteis do not qualify for the constitutional provision of scheduled tribe. So this is one among many attempts. But according to me, though it is said that the core of the problem is that the Meiteis were seeking ST status and the tribal groups in Manipur were against it, that is just what's on the surface. There is political design to this conflict, which was facilitated by the most recent Chief Minister, the former Chief Minister, Biren Singh, who is from the BJP. And there is a way in which he created animosity, which you wouldn't have seen like all communities in India, you see, have fissures between them, all right, like in particular regions. But the animosity that you see now in Manipur, where a particular community cannot go to the capital, the Kukis can't go to the capital of Manipur, and the Meiteis can't go to their home in the hill districts, that wasn't there before. So there is a political design to how this animosity was created, using different tags, different kind of propaganda, I would say, and that is what eventually escalated. Because overnight, no community just like that is going to go out and lynch somebody else. No community is going to have so much hatred that they parade 2 women naked. So there is a design that was at play in Manipur during the stint of this particular chief minister, and there is a lot of charges that has been leveled against him. But because the BJP is at the center, they have been protecting him. So even if we were to speak about peace, the fact that this has happened, the fact that Manipur was weaponized once again, the fact that so many young people have picked up weapons while Manipur was on a different path, and many of these young people have lost their future, they're not really inclined towards, something that they should be naturally inclined towards, like education, all of these things, somebody needs to be held accountable. But that's not happening.
Lila Jacinto, when this erupted in 2023, what was the narrative then compared to now?
Well, I think for the people who understood the narrative, it was pretty clear. And as both our guests have said, this is the Northeast state, and it's an intricate tapestry of groups and communities. But if you draw back a bit, the things that sparked it are something that is happening in quite a number of places in India. One is, as was said, the chief minister of this state of Manipur belongs to the Hindu nationalist BJP party, which is the party of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. There was the same issues which are constantly used but developed differently in different parts of India. This happened in 2023 after the Myanmar insurgency erupted, after, the junta, there was a coup in that area. There was a narrative in these border states, the same narrative that is used. What is the identity of a Manipuri? There was the fear of the outsider. There's always the fear of the outsider, that the refugees are going to come into Manipur. Then there's the issue of resources and protecting resources and who has access to these resources. So it was a matter of, India's form of affirmative action is very nuanced and calibrated.
Yeah, and when you have that status as for your community, it means you have a certain number of civil service jobs that are put aside for your community.
Exactly, and and these lines, these tension lines, run right through Indian society, in every part of Indian society. What is special about the northeastern states is that, a lot of these tensions, which now develop into communal tensions because they are politicized into communal tensions, the overall template is the narrative of the Hindu majority and the Muslim minority. In the Northeast, what is unusual is that the tribes are Christian. And in some respect, the narrative of the othering bear in mind the Meitei community. Now, this is a community that is based in the valley. There are often communities that are, they're either traders or they are the ones who have access to the exchange economy. They are considered the plains people or the heartland people. The Meitei is the only Hindu majority community in all of the northeastern states. And and the chief minister of Manipur, who's supposed to serve the Hindu majority community in the valley as well as the hill tribes who are Christian, started an extremely divisive discourse, in a state that borders Myanmar that has a huge drug trafficking problem. He started branding one community as narco-terrorists, the same stigmatization that happened. And this has exploded. And then, of course, there are the particularities of the particular geography, the fact that it borders Myanmar. And what's happening now is what the center has always done with the periphery, sort of overlook it and deal with it as a law and order issue.
Yeah, let's talk about that border. India's army last weekend targeting 4 rebel camps inside of Myanmar, which, according to a pro-insurgency statement, most notably hit a camp of neighboring state Assam's United Liberation Front of Assam and Manipur's People's Liberation Army, the PLA. The February of 2024, India's Interior Minister announced a plan for a fence the entire length of the 1,600-kilometer-long border between India and Myanmar. Representatives of the Nagas, the Kuki-Zos, opposing the plan, saying it will disrupt cross-border ethnic and familial ties. David Kamru, there's a Myanmar factor in all of this.
Yes, it's an explosive cocktail with Hindu nationalism and also the fact that there is a very bloody civil war occurring in Myanmar. And this particularly concerns Chin state, where you have people, the Chin are the same ethnic group, more or less, as the Kuki, Christian. And in Mizoram state, which is near Manipur, they have been welcomed, refugees coming from Chin state into Mizoram, which is not quite the case in Manipur. So, the border, the problem goes back some 70 years to when the border, like in many parts of the world, was artificially determined. This attempt to build the fences has exacerbated the situation because previously there was free movement allowed across the border between Chin State, Mizoram, and Manipur, and to impose this fence meant that the insurgents in Myanmar no longer had a place of refuge. The military in Chin State only controls about 10 or 20%, 10 to 15% of the country of Chin State. And the Chin State is also very important for the insurgency amongst the Burma majority in Saigon, which is adjacent. So these domestic problems in Manipur sort of play over into how the Indian government is trying to react to the junta. It supplied the junta with military. At the same time, previously, prior to the coup, there were plans for building a road across northeast India towards Myanmar and on towards Bangkok. And those plans have been dropped, obviously, with the war going on.
What about this drugs issue that both Binalakshmi Napram and Leela Jacinto have mentioned in our conversation? When you have porous borders, there's drug trafficking?
There is a degree of drug trafficking is there in the eastern side of Myanmar because the insurgency groups, need to get resources, and poppy cultivation is one of the sources of those resources to provide for the armed conflict. There is evidence, however, that the Kuki who are involved in this are also the kingpins behind this are from the Meitei community. So it's not purely an ethnic division. It's simply profiting from this unstable situation, to find financing for the insurgents, but also simply to enrich the kingpins.
All right, Grishma Kutha, alluding to a story that struck the whole of the Indian nation. Back in 2023, the violence erupts, and there's outrage over a harrowing video of 2 Kuki women being paraded naked in the streets of the Manipur city of Kangpokkebi. They recounted afterwards how the police stood idle. The video went viral, prompting one of the rare occasions where Prime Minister Modi publicly addressed the situation in Manipur.
The incident that has come to light in Manipur is a shameful incident for any civilized society. What has happened to the daughters of Manipur can never be forgiven. The incident is shameful for the country. The guilty will not be spared.
Binalakshmi Napram, your thoughts on what should Narendra Modi do at this juncture? What would you like to see from the Prime Minister?
First of all, I would like to just share that we are just absolutely just shocked that the Prime Minister of the world's largest democracy chose not to go and reconcile the people of Manipur in the last 2 years. I have stated in various interviews that the Prime Minister must take responsibility of what he has done in that particular region and must resign. We have called. He's like the father of the nation, and he does not even bother to come even for a second. That's one. So the Prime Minister, if he wanted to do something, he could have done 2 years ago. The Gujarat riots, where thousands of people were killed, were put down in just 3 days. The Delhi riots were put down in 11 days. And the Manipur conflict has been made to simmer for 2 years, showed that there is an element of political engineering, of conflict in my beautiful homeland, which we absolutely condemn in the strongest terms, because in any conflict, it's the poorest of the poor, the women, the children, the marginalized who are impacted. Those who engineer conflict do not die. They do not die, but those who are dead, as we're seeing in these images, are these innocent men, women, and children. Manipur is home to 20,000 registered widows. The violence on what happened on women is a phenomena of sexual violence and conflict. Thangja Manorama's case, what happened to our sisters during the last 2 years of conflict in both hills and the valley. Absolutely shocking. And this is something that we felt that has. But I also want to just clarify two things that our former panelists said. Number one, Manipur is home to all the religion. It's a multi-ethnic, multicultural. There are Meiteis who are actually Hindus. There are Meiteis who are Christians. There are Meiteis who are, Muslims. And there are Meiteis who are also following indigenous faith of Sanamahi. So to say that it's a majority Hindu, minority Christian is again a term which many journalists have used, and we appeal to them that please look into what is happening with a more minute eye, because everyone, Hindu, Muslim, Christians, indigenous people, we have suffered tremendously in this conflict, number one. Number two, what I would also like to say that this is, conflict profits, not peace. The northeast of India is one of the 36 global biodiversity hotspots, sitting on a field of minerals, oil, natural resources. For us, after 2 years of the conflict not coming to an end, it is a very clear proof that some people are benefiting out of this conflict. And we have seen very clear elements of the political economy, which has fueled some of this conflict. So the buffer zones are not what people want. People want food, shelter, safety, security, good education, and an ability to hope life for their children, and not staying in 300 relief camps, both in the hills and valley of Manipur. So I appeal to the policymakers of India, to those who are following our conflict, please do not do divide and rule. Look into the dynamics of what's happening in the political economy of this conflict, where there are guns, drugs, critical minerals, and many of our policymakers are playing the part. Look at what the multinational corporations' roles are. The 100 dams that are being planned along our region. Please, and also the geopolitical conflict, as one of our guests said, Manipur, Mizoram is not the country, not just the only state which gave shelter to the Burmese. Manipur had been given shelter to Burmese since 1988. Since the military coup happened repeatedly, Manipur had sheltered 40,000 people from Myanmar in the past 10 to 14 years. So it is the way in which this conflict is engineered in the last 2 years, where there are active actors who are dividing the community. We are calling to them to stop it, because this is about our lives, our land, and our community. Do not divide and rule, and this includes armed groups. Several armed groups which have been propped up. Several radical groups have been propped up by those who are close to gun threats. Please stop the engineering of conflict. Manipur is a very sensitive biodiversity hotspot, and the northeast of India, one of our colleagues have said today, the northeast of India share 1,640 kilometer belt with Myanmar. It's not just in Mizoram. And the northeast of India, and Manipur in particular, defends the borders of India. It is a national security issue for us to pit one community against another from the same state. Please stop the divide and rule. There are cross-national, transnational criminal networks at play here. Please look into the political conflict, and please work with the women of Manipur in hills and valley and across the northeast of India to bring back our dignity, our stability, and our peace.
Grishma Nakutha, let me ask you, we've touched upon the fact that it is a remote region compared to the rest of India. India, a nation where it's gone nationally from strength to strength in terms of economic growth. You still have, what, more than 60% of the country that lives, though, in the countryside. What's your personal experience when you've been to Manipur in terms of how much globalization is touching the region, and whether or not that globalization is something that can help foster reconciliation or highlight divisions?
So, first of all, these economic indicators about India are extremely wrong, because India has, when we speak about India being developed, etc., there is a lot to kind of break down there. But even if you were to look at, if you were to compare how Delhi deals with different states in India, even though I am from a state called Tamil Nadu, which is also like one of the farthest states from New Delhi, similar to Manipur. One of the reasons why Tamil Nadu is doing well is because we are not landlocked like Manipur. Otherwise, I would believe that part of the South would probably be backward as well if we were in the same situation that the Northeast is, which is they're landlocked. And hence, because of the nature of their terrain itself, they're dependent on Delhi. And Delhi has strategically, Delhi has periodically, Delhi has, without any kind of empathy, been using that against that region. The Look East policy or the Act East policy, as the present government has redefined the policy that it engineers to the Northeast to make connectivity the rest of the, to the rest of Asia better, at least Southeast Asia, has nothing in it for the people in the Northeast. Most of these roads that supposedly connect to Thailand or to a port in Burma, which is to, make logistics and other kinds of connectivity better for India or for the Northeast, actually are failed plans, because they have never consulted with the people of Northeast. What is it that you all, if a big chunk of that region isn't even part of policy making, then how will any form of globalization or any form of pro-market reforms happen in that region? So the biggest fallacy is that the country of India or the government, the central government, thinks for everybody in the country, but unfortunately, it hasn't been this way. India is relatively a young country. It's like, 70-ish years. And in these 70-ish years, most of the policies, most of the ideas that Delhi has had hasn't really actually helped many of the farthest regions in the country. If at all some states are doing better, it's because of their own efforts. So when you look at the Northeast, when you look at Manipur, this conflict has put Manipur back by, let's say, 2-3 generations, 3 decades. And why is it that in spite of seeing this visibly, because you asked me, how is it when I go to Manipur, when I've been reporting, it's not just that people are divided and they're living separately. The Meiteis are living in the valley and the Kukis are living in the hills. And they can't go to the capital, which is where most of the government services are. It is also that the districts in which most of the tribes of Manipur live are extremely underdeveloped. And when I say underdeveloped, imagine traveling for more than 12 hours on a path of 100 kilometers. More than 12 hours. Right. And there are particular villages where there is no mobile connectivity, there's no mobile network, there's no internet. So you can imagine how this conflict could have further fractured already underdeveloped region.
Right. Let me bring in on this, Leela Jacinto, because we heard on that point David Cameron talk about that project from years past to build a highway that would go. Obviously, part of that project's problem is that there's been a running civil war now over the border in Myanmar. But when you have a project that's decided in the capital in India, of course, it also comes up against local politics, state politics. It's a federal state.
Absolutely. I mean, connectivity is the catchword now of governments. But this is also happening, I mean, in Myanmar, they call it ceasefire capitalism, which is basically, all these groups, they have so many insurgencies, they get into negotiations, they have a ceasefire, developers come in, the local communities see none of the benefits of this, and this carries on in spurts until the next outbreak of violence. Look, one is not from the community, I'm not from Manipur. However, you've got to look at the structural issues over here. Traditionally, the tribes of northeastern India have been asking for and always been asking for, and this is a problem that plagues all of India's insurgencies in its borderlands. And India has plenty of insurgencies. There's also the Kashmir insurgencies. Traditionally,
and also near the Chinese border.
Absolutely. Traditionally, these communities are asking for autonomy in order to determine themselves, in order to determine what's best for them. In the context of Manipur, the hill tribes want a level of autonomy. Manipur is different from the other northeastern states in that the capital is in the valley, and there is the Meitei community is not likely to have the state broken up. So the state is not going to break up, but within the state structures, the only way forward, should the Indian government want to seriously sit down and sort this out, is to give some level of local autonomy to the hill tribes within the structure of the state. Because we come across, these same structural issues, the center, the periphery, the resources, how these resources don't serve communities. And now what's introduced in the mix is arms. There are young people taking up arms, and there are old insurgent groups that have a history of getting into ceasefire talks with the state. So now we have these old problems with a very armed populace.
This is happening in India.
It's happening in India, it's happening in Myanmar. I mean, this instability, there are people who benefit from this instability. The Chinese, for example, in Shan State, with the Wa army on the eastern side of Myanmar, exploiting rare earths, destroying the river system that's now affecting people in Thailand. And so these questions, we're seeing a situation in Myanmar, perhaps the northeast of India, where we're heading towards a degree of fragmentation. Now, the Indian government has the capacity to control in a way that the junta no longer has control over the country. The junta now only controls about 60, maybe less than half of the country of Myanmar. The Indian government is not quite in that situation. But the fragmentation is contagious on both sides of the border.
It's contagious, and so you need to contain it fast. We're running short on time, but I do want to ask Binalakshmi Nepram about something you mentioned at the outset of this conversation, how you're trying reconciliation initiatives that are bottom-up, women-driven ones. How are you faring so far in those efforts? How does it work? Tell us just very briefly what your plan is.
Yes. So currently we are working on a concept called indigenous peace building. And what that means is, if you look at Manipur in northeast India, there are 45 million indigenous people there. Myanmar is home to 60 million indigenous communities too. The history of this 100 million in the northeast of India and Myanmar, they are not in the textbooks and the history of any of these nation states. This particular region is what I dubbed as world's forgotten crisis. 100 million people locked in, militarized, divided, crushed, their dignity taken, and arms and drugs flooding this particular region. So one of the ways that we are trying out is this. What is happening in Manipur is not unique. We studied conflicts around the world, and we learned that there are 107 conflicts in the world, and more than 200 million people displaced. And 80% of these conflicts are happening in biodiversity hotspots where indigenous people live, like in Manipur. So the solution is to ensure not just a top-down approach to conflict reduction, but it is time that all the ethnic communities, indigenous groups of the Indo-Burma, as well as in northeast of India, together with different governments who are supportive, are able to bring about what indigenous ways of peace building, learn how to way of coexistence, because that is the only way forward.
Have you facilitated discussions between rival groups?
Absolutely. We started what is known as Northeast India Women Initiative for Peace. We have got together women from different warring groups in many of these, what is known as the first Northeast India Women Peace Congregation that we have done. As I mentioned in the beginning of this program, that conflicts are engineered in our territories. And we have said as women of Manipur, if you can engineer conflict, we can also engineer peace. And this is what is in front of us. We are working through village to village, network to networks that we have built in both the hills and the valley of Manipur for the last 2 decades. Our work has been on the field for the last 2 decades to ensure that, because the women have to feed their children, they have to take care after a conflict is over. So we are calling upon all the indigenous women from across, not just in Manipur and northeast of India, and even across the Indo-Burma border, because this is what is known as one of the world's forgotten crises. So it requires a tremendous hindsight and good intent to be able to bring these very disturbed Indo-Burma border to peace. The people in the region are beautiful people living for centuries amongst each other, and it's time that we work to ensure that the peace returns in our homelands.
And we want to thank you, Bina Lakshmi and Apram, for joining us. I want to thank as well Grishma Kutha, Leela Jacinto, David Camru. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.